I only married you because you're the boss's daughter, Oliver said with a smirk. I lay there sick in bed, watching as he tossed aside the scarves and gloves I had lovingly knitted over the years, discarded like they meant nothing. His words hit harder than my illness, but I knew then, I wasn't going to let him walk away without consequences. My name is Stacy Morgan. I've been married to Oliver for 5 years. We don't have children, but we lived what I once believed was a happy life. Oliver, a dedicated workaholic, was often away. I missed him, but on his rare days off, he'd always make time for me. That effort made the loneliness feel worth it. We met through my father, who had been Oliver's boss. Soon after we married, Oliver encouraged me to become a stay-at-home wife. I agreed, thinking it would allow me to support him while also enjoying some freedom. I made friends in the neighborhood, took up sewing and knitting, and filled my time with hobbies. Every winter, I knitted Oliver scarves and gloves. My early attempts were clumsy, but I improved. Eventually, he even said they looked store-bought. Encouraged by his praise, I poured my heart into every stitch. Someday, when we have a child, I want to teach them to sew, I once said. Then I'll learn too, he smiled. That life, the cozy, quiet one I imagined, felt within reach. Then, 2 years ago, things changed. One evening, while waiting for Oliver, I collapsed. He rushed me to the hospital. When I woke up, I overheard the doctor telling him my condition was serious, not fatal, but something I'd have to live with. Despite the fear, Oliver reassured me, I'll be here for you, we'll get through this together. And he was. For a while, he visited almost daily, brought my sewing kit, and even tried to sew with me. I cherish those moments, but after a year, the visits slowed, then, they nearly stopped. I convinced myself he was busy. I kept knitting. The doctor said I'd be discharged by year's end, so I made him a pair of gloves, imagining the moment we'd reconnect. But when he finally showed up again, something in him had changed. You're still making these? Honestly, it's a nuisance, he said coldly, taking the gloves without a glance. Then he handed me 2 things, the untouched scarf I had knitted for him the previous year, and divorce papers. It's been almost 2 years, he said flatly, you'll be discharged soon, and I can't keep doing this, it's time to move on. I looked down at the divorce papers in my hands. Oliver had already signed them. So, this is how it ends, I thought. In truth, I'd imagined this moment ever since he stopped visiting. I tried to dismiss the fear by telling myself he was just busy, but deep down, I knew, the Oliver I loved wouldn't have left me in silence. If work had truly consumed him, he would have explained. Still, I managed to ask calmly, why are you doing this? It wasn't out of desperation. I didn't want to cling to a man who no longer saw value in me, but he had once held my hand and promised, we'll get through this together. That memory deserved an explanation. Oliver's response was as cruel as it was honest. Isn't it obvious? Ever since I married you, it's been nothing but trouble. I'm tired of the scarves, the gloves, the handmade junk. I only married you because you're the boss's daughter, and now I'm supposed to deal with a sick wife on top of everything? He laughed, a cold, mocking sound. The love I thought he had for me had turned into disdain. My affection, my efforts, my dreams of a quiet life together, they were nothing but burdens in his eyes. Every time I spoke about love, happiness, or even loneliness, he must have found me pathetic. Seriously, he scoffed, who wears handmade scarves anymore? It's embarrassing. You act like you're giving me treasure. I glanced at his neck. He was wearing a luxury brand scarf, one I'd never given him. Its price probably matched a week's worth of groceries. Compared to that, my handmade gifts didn't stand a chance. Maybe they never had. I wondered then, had he ever worn anything I made, or had he always hated them in silence? After I got sick, my father retired and left the company, with no ties left to the man who gave him his job. Oliver no longer had to pretend. In fact, my illness had been convenient for him. During the first year of my hospitalization, he made regular visits, always just long enough to maintain the image of a devoted husband. I could almost hear my father back then, proudly telling his co-workers how hardworking and kind Oliver was, taking care of his sick wife while excelling at work. That was Oliver's true motive. I wasn't a wife to him, I was leverage. When I voiced this suspicion aloud, Oliver blinked in surprise, then, with a shrug, admitted it. Yeah. It made work easier, everyone pitied me, I got praised for every little thing. If I needed time off or wanted to leave early, all I had to say was my wife is in the hospital and doors opened. Sympathy got me ahead. He smiled, not apologetically, but triumphantly. I'm up for promotion now. Those idiots have no idea, honestly, your illness did more for my career than anything else. I lowered my gaze, letting his words sink in. When I finally looked up, I saw a man I no longer recognized. That smile, the one I used to love, now twisted into something selfish and smug. Well, I said quietly, if I helped, I suppose that's something. We won't be seeing each other again, so take care. I handed him the signed divorce papers. He didn't say another word. He turned and walked away without looking back. And just like that, it was over. Our marriage ended with a signature and a shrug. I cried, but only once, quietly. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned to my parents' home. When I told my father what had happened, his face turned dark. I never imagined he'd be that kind of man, he said, clearly shaken. But for me, his opinion didn't matter anymore. Because now I knew the truth. And I was ready to move forward, on my own terms. I eventually calmed my father down and told him I wanted to return to my parents' home. After I had finished organizing things at the house I once shared with Oliver, my parents were understanding and encouraged me to do whatever made me happy. For now, I decided to move back in with them. But before that, I needed closure. I wanted to visit the house one last time. However, when we arrived, something was off. The key wouldn't turn in the front door. Confused, my parents and I exchanged glances. We rang the doorbell. To our surprise, a complete stranger answered. Stunned, I asked about the situation. The man looked equally surprised and explained that he had purchased the house several months ago. He now lived there with his wife and child. They seemed happy, settled. My parents were livid, but I held myself back. I didn't want to disturb the new family, so I quietly bowed, apologized for the confusion, and left. Still, I couldn't let it go. I called Oliver immediately. He answered casually. Oh yeah, I sold the house while you were in the hospital. The money, think of it as compensation. It was in my name, so I had the right to sell it. You don't really have a say, do you? His words left me speechless for a moment. I let out a sigh. He had sold our home without telling me, and apparently, he'd done it around the same time he stopped visiting. Even if he had already decided on a divorce, doing something so drastic without discussion was unforgivable. Our divorce had been finalized with signed documents, but we had agreed, since I was still hospitalized, that we'd meet after my discharge to settle the matter of assets and compensation. That meeting was scheduled for next week, but Oliver had clearly jumped ahead, acting on his own. Worse still, he spoke as if he'd done nothing wrong. Calmly, I told him. You really don't understand anything, do you? What's that supposed to mean? He asked, sounding annoyed. I'll explain it to you next week, I said and ended the call. Turning to my father, I smiled softly. Dad, can I ask a favor? After I explained everything, he nodded with a grim expression. I've got the paperwork ready, the meeting is soon, but don't worry, we'll be prepared, he said. I could tell he was still furious, and probably blamed himself for ever trusting Oliver in the first place. I thanked him and waited for the day of the meeting. For the first time in a long while, I smiled, genuinely. The thought of Oliver's reaction gave me some comfort. The day came. We held the meeting at my parents' house. Oliver sat across from us, me and my parents seated together in silent solidarity. If he felt guilty facing my family, he didn't show it. In fact, he looked smug, as if the outcome was already in his favor. I'm not here to argue, he said with a condescending air. I've already sold the house. I'm not asking for anything else. The money from the sale is enough. I think that's fair, all things considered. My father's face flushed with anger, but I reached over and gently rested my hand on his. There was no need for raised voices. We knew the truth, and soon, so would Oliver. There's something important you should see first, I said. At my cue, my father handed him a document. It was the deed to the land where the house once stood. It was still in my father's name. You're right, the house itself was yours, I said evenly, but the land? That's a different story. As this document shows, it belongs to my father. He never transferred ownership. You sold the house, but not the land it sat on. Oliver's expression faltered. So what? He said after a pause. I still own the house. That's not illegal. You can't get back at me over that. He laughed, trying to brush it off. Legally, he was correct. Owning the house allowed him to sell it, even if he didn't own the land, but that wasn't the real issue. The buyers of the house were now living on land they had no legal right to occupy, and that would soon become a massive problem, for them, and for him. Because what buyer wants to discover they own a house on land they don't? Oliver had overlooked one simple fact in his greed: not all damage is illegal, but it can be deeply consequential. And I intended to make sure those consequences found their way to him. You sold the house, didn't you? I said calmly, but since the land still belongs to my father, he has the legal right to charge rent to the current residents. That would cause quite a stir, wouldn't it? The situation was clearly not what the buyers had been told. While my father and I had no intention of demanding rent or forcing anyone out, we certainly had no reason to give up our land rights for free either. In fact, the most reasonable course of action would be to sell the land to the family. We had no desire to disrupt their lives, and we wouldn't demand monthly payments, but if they refused to purchase the land, it would become a problem. That land was originally a gift from my father to support our life together, not something to be handed off to strangers without a second thought. And if we go down that route, I added, the family might decide to sue you. After all, they were misled. Imagine buying what you thought was your dream home, only to find out the land it sits on isn't included, and now there are new expenses involved. After confirming the land ownership through official documents, my father and I went to speak with the family ourselves. Once we explained everything, they were surprisingly understanding. To them, the issue was simple: if anyone had to answer for this mess, it was the seller, Oliver. If this doesn't get resolved, the husband said, we'll sue him. He didn't disclose the truth. We just want peace of mind. When I relayed this to Oliver, the blood drained from his face. He was starting to understand that his actions were going to cost him, one way or another. His voice trembled as he asked, What should I do? I smiled. The simplest way out is for the family to buy the land from us, then you reimburse them. That way, ownership is consolidated, and no one has to sue. That was the cleanest solution. The buyers would be made whole, and Oliver could avoid legal trouble. Of course, the family hadn't been informed of any land-related costs when they purchased the house, so they would undoubtedly expect Oliver to cover that amount in full. It was, after all, his deception that had caused the situation. There was only one problem: the land was in a prime location, more valuable than the house itself. Covering its cost would likely wipe Oliver out. Even if he liquidated every asset he had, it wouldn't be enough. He'd walk away with nothing. I leaned in. Or, you could try buying back the house and then paying us for the land, but in that case, you'd also have to pay the family a relocation fee. It's a messy option, but you'd end up with both the house and land. You could sell them again, maybe recover some of your losses. But we both knew that was unrealistic. The relocation fee alone would drain him, leaving no profit at all. Either way, Oliver would lose, badly. Oh, I added casually, and about alimony, I plan to claim emotional damages. The way you treated me, the stress you caused while I was hospitalized, your manipulation, all of it has taken a toll. I knew my chances of winning such a claim weren't great. Proof was limited, but simply raising the issue while Oliver was cornered was enough. The timing was perfect. Just as he began to squirm, my father spoke up. Combat cutting. Even though I'm retired, I still keep in touch with people at the company. I've been hearing stories about what you said about my daughter, and how you used her for your own gain. Let's just say, your reputation's not as clean as you thought. My father smiled as he spoke, but it was the kind of smile that got deep. Oliver's expression crumbled. The professional status he had built, largely by exploiting our marriage, was now crumbling. Now, I said, Folding my hands, let's talk about what happens next, the division of assets, compensation, and your obligations regarding the house and land. I smiled at him, different from the smiles I used to give when I was trying to hold us together. This smile was honest, confident, and free. I hope you understand, I said, that what happens to everything you own, will be decided right here. Oliver gave a dry, forced laugh, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The rest of the meeting went exactly how I wanted. Oliver agreed to pay me alimony, he also agreed to pay for the land on which the house stood. We explained this to the new homeowners, who were satisfied with the resolution. In the end, everyone walked away better off, except for Oliver. Word of his misdeeds and manipulations spread within the company, thanks in part to the conversations my father had initiated. His long-anticipated promotion was put on hold, his colleagues began to distance themselves, eventually, he resigned, defeated and disgraced. It was poetic, really, karma in its simplest form. When you build a life on lies and selfish gain, it's bound to collapse under the weight of the truth. As for me, I'm living peacefully at my parents' home, where I've started a small sewing class. It's not a booming business, but I've found joy in sharing my passion with neighborhood wives and kids. I once dreamed of building a family with children of my own. That didn't happen, but now, in this quiet life, surrounded by laughter and fabric and creativity, I've found a new kind of happiness. And this time, it's real.